The 5:47 alarm doesn't wake Brooke Linden anymore. She's usually already standing at the kitchen counter, both hands wrapped around a mug that's gone lukewarm while she stares at nothing in particular, running through whatever yesterday left unfinished in her head before she lets today begin. She's 28 years old. She's been a nurse for 4 of those years, all of them at Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio. She drives a 2017 Civic with a cracked passenger mirror that she keeps meaning to fix. She buys the same brand of granola bars every week because thinking about breakfast takes energy she doesn't have. She ties her scrub top the same way every morning, left string first, 2 loops, then right, a ritual so ingrained she doesn't remember learning it. She is not the kind of person who expects anyone to notice her. That's not bitterness. That's just the shape of the life she's built, and for the most part, it suits her fine. By the time she pulls into the Mercy General parking structure on a gray Tuesday in March, she's already thinking about room 412. Specifically, she's thinking about the O2 reading she logged at 11:40 the night before, 93%, which is low enough to watch but not low enough to alarm, in a man who'd been breathing shallower than his chart suggested he should be. She'd stayed an extra 90 minutes, charted the trend, left notes for the morning team, then drove home in the dark, ate half a granola bar over the sink, and went to sleep thinking about whether 93 was going to hold or whether it was going to slip. She is, as her supervisor Tamsin sometimes says with a mix of affection and mild exhaustion, the most quietly stubborn person on the entire 4th floor. Room 412 had come to her on the previous Wednesday, when the floor was short 2 nurses, and the charge desk was fielding calls from 3 different attending physicians at once. The patient was a transfer from ortho. A man named Ryland Croft, 34 years old, admitted 5 days prior following a vehicle collision on I-70. 2 fractured ribs, a bruised spleen, soft tissue damage along his left shoulder. Nothing that would kill him, but plenty that would make him wish, on certain mornings, that it might. His intake form listed his occupation as consultant. The section asking for emergency contacts was blank. Brooke had introduced herself the same way she introduced herself to every new patient, firmly, making eye contact, not performing warmth but not withholding it either. "I'm Linden. I'll be your primary for the week. If you need anything, you use the call button. If it's not working, you knock on the wall. Somebody will come." Ryland Croft had looked at her for a moment before responding. He had the kind of face that processed things before it showed them. A slight delay between receiving information and acknowledging it, like a man who'd learned a long time ago not to react until he'd decided what his reaction should be. "Understood," he said. That was more or less the most elaborate conversation they had for the first 3 days. He wasn't difficult, he wasn't demanding. He didn't ask for extra blankets or complain about the food or press the call button for things he could manage himself. He read actual books, paperback, the spines creased from use. He slept when his body told him to. He answered medical questions with the efficiency of someone who had been asked them many times and understood that the asking was necessary. On the 4th day, a Friday, Brooke arrived for her shift to find a Belgian Malinois sitting in the corner of room 412. The dog was black and tan, heavy-shouldered, somewhere around 90 pounds, wearing a red service vest. He had been, Tamsin explained with an expression that suggested the situation had already consumed significant administrative energy, approved for a supervised daytime visit by the patient's physician. After Ryland Croft had provided documentation that the animal was a certified working K9, formerly assigned to his unit, currently in the care of a handler friend who'd driven up from Fort Campbell that morning. The dog's name was Zeus. Brooke stood in the doorway of 412 for a moment, looking at the dog. The dog looked back at her with the particular calibrated alertness of an animal trained to assess, not threaten. "He's clean," Ryland said, without looking up from his book. "Checked this morning. He won't be a problem." Brooke stepped into the room, checked Ryland's monitors, updated his chart. Zeus tracked her movement without lifting his head from his paws. When she reached across Ryland to adjust the IV line, the dog's ears shifted slightly, not aggressive, just noting, and then settled again. "He monitors for threats," Ryland said. "He doesn't see one." Brooke glanced at the dog, then at Ryland. Good to know, she said. That was the fourth day. On the sixth day, the Monday, Ryland's O2 dropped during the night and Brooke stayed until it steadied. She didn't tell him. There was no particular reason to. It was her job. On the seventh day, that gray Tuesday, Craig Whitmore arrived on the fourth floor for the third time in a week, and everything changed. Craig Whitmore was 51 years old and appeared to have spent most of those years in rooms where he was the loudest voice. He was not a large man, medium height, soft around the middle, the kind of tan that comes from a lot of time in Florida rather than actual sun, but he had the manner of someone who'd confused his bank account for his character for long enough that the error had become permanent. His wife, Sandra Whitmore, was recovering from a cardiac ablation procedure on the third floor. She was doing well. Her physicians were pleased. Her numbers were trending in the right direction. Craig Whitmore was not pleased. He had filed 2 formal complaints in the preceding week, one alleging that Sandra had not been seen quickly enough during her initial presentation to the ER, and one alleging that the nursing staff had been dismissive when he'd asked questions about her post-procedure medication schedule. Both complaints had been reviewed and addressed. Both had been found to reflect standard of care practice with no deviation. Craig Whitmore had, upon receiving that information, told the patient relations coordinator that the hospital was running a racket and that he intended to bring this whole place down if it's the last thing I do. None of this had anything to do with Brooke Linden, who had never treated Sandra Whitmore and whose only awareness of the situation came from overhearing Tamsin's increasingly weary updates at the charge desk. She was not Sandra's nurse. She was not involved in any of the complaints. She simply worked on the same floor of the same building. That was enough. It was 2:17 in the afternoon when Brooke came around the corner of the fourth-floor corridor with a medication cart and a stack of patient files balanced against her forearm, the kind of multitasking that looks chaotic from the outside and is actually just the steady practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 1,000 times. She heard Craig Whitmore before she saw him. He was at the far end of the hallway, near the elevator bank, talking to Tamsin, or rather, talking at Tamsin, who was holding a tablet to her chest and maintaining the expression of someone who has decided, professionally, that this is simply another feature of the job. Told us it would be 48 hours. It's been 5 days. 5 days. You want to explain to me why my wife still isn't home? Brooke kept her head down and moved to pass them. She had medications to deliver. She had 3 other patients to check on before end of shift. She was not part of this conversation. She almost made it. Hey, the word landed hard. You. She stopped. Craig Whitmore was looking directly at her. His face was flushed in the way of a man who'd been sustaining his anger through sheer momentum. His eyes moved over her scrubs, her badge, her cart. You're one of the nurses from this floor. I am, Brooke said. You were here Saturday. I saw you near Sandra's room. You talked to me by the elevator. Brooke kept her voice level. I may have passed you in the hall. I'm not on Mrs. Whitmore's care team. That's not what you said Saturday. She hadn't said anything to him Saturday. She was nearly certain of it. Mr. Whitmore, she said, I can get you connected with the charge nurse or the patient advocate if you have concerns about your wife's care. But I'm not the right person. Stop. His voice went flat. I am so tired of being shuffled around by people who don't have the guts to just stand still and answer a question. My wife was supposed to be home 2 days ago. 2 days ago. You know what she's doing right now? She's lying in a hospital bed, crying, because nobody on this floor can give us a straight answer about anything. I understand you're worried. I genuinely do, but don't you do that. His voice climbed. Down the hallway, 2 orderlies had slowed to a stop near the supply room door. Tamsin was standing very still. Don't you hit me with that sympathetic nurse voice like I'm some kind of, you don't understand anything. You just want me gone so you can go back to doing whatever it is you people do between patients. Which is apparently nothing because my wife has been waiting 4 hours for a follow-up that should have taken 45 minutes and nobody can tell me why. Mr. Whitmore. He stepped toward her, not dramatically, Just close the space, the way people do when they've run out of words, and their body is trying to finish the argument for them. You told her she wasn't critical enough. His voice dropped, which made it worse. You stood outside her room, and you told her she didn't qualify for closer monitoring. That's what she said. She heard it. I was not in your wife's room. She heard it. Mr. Whitmore, I have never spoken to your wife. He reached out and grabbed her arm. It was fast. The grip landed above her elbow, fingers pressing into the muscle hard enough that she felt it in her teeth. The stack of files slipped. Her other hand went instinctively to catch the medication cart, and she overcorrected. Weight going forward, knee dropping to the floor, files hitting the linoleum in a cascade of paper and scattered pens. Her tablet slid from the top of the cart and cracked face down on the tile. And then she was on the floor, on both knees, looking at the scattered mess of the last 2 hours of her work, and Craig Whitmore was standing over her. The hallway had gone quiet. Not the quiet of people leaving, the quiet of people freezing, that particular awful silence of a room full of witnesses who cannot make themselves move. My wife has been in that bed for 5 days, Craig said. His voice was low now, almost conversational, like he'd burned through the theatrical part and arrived somewhere colder. She is 63 years old and she is scared, and nobody in this building gives a damn about her as a person. You're all just here until your shift ends. That's all you are. Brooke did not move, not because she couldn't, because she was deciding, very carefully, with the part of her brain that didn't run on fear or anger, what came next. She was aware of her own breathing. She was aware of the crack in her tablet screen. She was aware of Tamsin, somewhere behind her, finally moving toward the charge desk phone. She was aware of the sound that came from the far end of the hallway. Not a voice, not footsteps exactly, or not just footsteps. Footsteps and then something else underneath them. A secondary rhythm, steady, 4-beat, the soft, deliberate click of claws on linoleum. Craig Whitmore heard it too. She watched his eyes move. She turned. Rylan Croft was at the far end of the corridor. He had on his hospital gown and his grip socks and nothing else. His left arm was still carrying the slight favor of a man with bruised ribs, not limping exactly, but moving with an economy that suggested each step was chosen. His face was still pale from the better part of a week in bed. His eyes were not. Zeus walked at his left heel, no leash, no command being issued. The dog moved the way water moves, fully committed to its direction, taking the shape of the space without effort. His red service vest was still on. His attention had, the moment he cleared the doorway, fixed on Craig Whitmore and not moved. Rylan walked the length of the hallway without hurrying. There was no performance in it, no swagger, no deliberate intimidation. He was a man in grip socks and a hospital gown who had apparently decided that something down the hall required his attention, and so he had come to attend to it. The simplicity of that somehow made it worse, made it more. Craig Whitmore took one step back. He didn't seem to notice he'd done it. Zeus stopped when Rylan stopped. 6 inches from Craig's right leg, the dog sat, did not growl, did not show teeth, just sat and looked up at the man with the focused patience of an animal that has learned that patience is more frightening than noise. Rylan looked down at Brooke for a moment. Then he looked at Craig. Sir, one word, flat as pavement. Craig recovered something. Who are you? You don't work here. Patient, Rylan said. Room 412. He glanced at Brooke's scattered files without expression, then back at Craig. I heard your voice from down the hall. You've got a carrying voice. Craig's jaw tightened. This is a private. I'm going to say something to you, Rylan said. Not louder, not quieter. And then I'll let you get back to whatever this is. He waited 1 beat, which Craig did not fill. That woman on the floor has been my nurse for 7 days. She's checked my vitals 14 times since last Wednesday. I've been counting. It gives me something to do. And 3 of those times were between midnight and 3 in the morning, on nights when she wasn't supposed to still be here. Her shift ends at 7. She stayed because my oxygen was trending low, and she didn't want to hand it off until she was certain it was stable. He paused. She never mentioned it to me. I found it in my own chart. The tersing notes. 3 separate nights she could have gone home, and she stayed instead. The hallway was still absolutely quiet. I've been in situations, Ryland said. Where the difference between going home and not going home was one person paying attention when they didn't have to. One person who stayed in the room when they could have walked out. You're standing over one of those people right now. Craig's mouth opened, closed. Zeus had not moved, had not looked away. My wife, Craig started. I'm sorry about your wife. And the thing was, he sounded like he meant it. No edge, no sarcasm, just the flat, direct acknowledgement of a man who knew what fear looked like from the inside. I understand being scared for someone you love. I understand it makes you want to put your hands on something, because sitting still with that feeling is close to unbearable. But it doesn't give you the right to put your hands on her. His eyes moved to Brooke, briefly. Or anyone else. Silence. Craig Whitmore looked at Brooke. She was still on the floor, both hands now resting flat on her thighs, watching him. She was not crying. She was not pleading. She was just watching. The way she watched everything, with that quiet attention that it always looked, to people who didn't understand it, like absence. Something moved across Craig's face. It wasn't remorse, exactly, or at least not a clean version of it. It was more like a man arriving, late and confused, at the scene of something he'd caused and not fully understanding until this moment that he'd caused it. He looked at Zeus. Zeus looked back at him. Security arrived at the elevator bank, 2 officers who had clearly been moving fast and arrived slightly out of breath. Tamsin was behind them with the phone still in her hand. Craig Whitmore left without saying anything else. He walked to the elevator and stood with his back to the hallway and pressed the button and waited. When the doors opened, he got in. He didn't look back. The hallway exhaled. Ryland extended his right hand to Brooke. She looked at it for a moment, not from hesitation, just from the slight recalibration of a person who has been braced for something that has just passed. Then she reached up and took it. He pulled her to her feet with no ceremony, no comment on her weight or her grip or the situation. Just the simple mechanical fact of a hand offered and a person helped up. You should report that, he said. I know, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. He bent, carefully, favoring his ribs, and picked up one of her files from the floor, handed it to her. She took it. Zeus leaned forward and pressed his nose briefly against the back of her hand. Not a nudge, not a demand, just contact, the way dogs sometimes reach for people who have gone very still. Then Ryland Croft turned and walked back down the hallway toward room 412. He didn't look back either. She filed the report that afternoon. A formal incident report, time-stamped and witnessed, with Tamsin's signature alongside hers and the names of the 2 orderlies who had been standing by the supply room. She sat in a chair outside the charge desk and wrote it with the careful precision of a person who knows that what she puts on paper will matter later. She did not embellish. She did not minimize. She drove home at 7:20, ate a full granola bar this time, standing at the counter, not staring at nothing. Craig Whitmore received a formal no-contact order from Mercy General's administration within 48 hours. Access to the 4th floor was suspended pending a full review of his conduct. Sandra Whitmore was assigned a patient advocate who met with her directly, answered her questions in full, and helped her understand both her discharge timeline and the medication schedule Craig had apparently been confused about for days. Sandra, by all accounts, was relieved. A letter went into Brooke's file, a commendation, noting her conduct, her composure, and her record of extended shift documentation on behalf of patient care. Brooke read it once, filed it, went back to work. On the 10th day, a Thursday, Ryland Croft was discharged. His ribs had healed enough. His O2 had been steady at 97 for 4 days running. His spleen showed no further bruising on imaging. The attending cleared him at morning rounds with the particular understated satisfaction of a physician whose patient has, without drama, gotten better. Brooke was at the nurse's station at 11:30, running through charts before the lunch handoff when she heard the elevator open. She didn't look up immediately. The station was busy, and there were 3 things requiring her attention in the next 15 minutes. She looked up when she heard Zeus. Ryland Croft was standing on the far side of the charge desk in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a gray Henley, boots, with Zeus at his heel and a backpack over one shoulder. He looked different out of the hospital gown, more complete somehow, more like a person who occupies the full dimensions of a room. He crossed to the station. He set something on the desk in front of her, a folded piece of paper, and didn't say anything. She looked at it. She looked at him. "Travel safe," she said. He nodded once. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. Zeus walked with him. Neither of them looked back. She waited until the elevator doors had closed before she picked up the paper. It was folded twice neatly, in the way of someone who had done it intentionally rather than just crumpling it. She unfolded it. The note was handwritten. His penmanship was spare and clear, the handwriting of a man who'd filled out a lot of official forms and learned to make his letters legible above everything else. Room 412, 6 days, 3 nights you didn't have to stay. I counted. Thank you. Below the words, pressed in blue ink, was a paw print. Zeus's. She stared at it for a long moment. The station moved around her. Phones, voices, the rhythmic beep of a monitor down the hall, the particular ambient noise of a floor that never fully goes quiet. Tamsin passed behind her with a stack of folders and touched her briefly on the shoulder without stopping. Brooke folded the paper carefully, twice the same way he had. She tucked it into the left breast pocket of her scrubs, flat against her chest, and she stood there for a moment with one hand pressed over it before she turned back to her charts. She had 3 more hours on shift. There was work to do. She used to tell herself, in the harder stretches, the nights that ran long, the patients who didn't improve, the shifts that ended with her sitting in her car in the parking structure for 10 minutes before she could make herself drive home, that nobody was watching. Not in a self-pitying way, just as a fact. A nurse who stays late does it in the dark. The patient is asleep. The hallway is empty. The chart gets updated in the system, and nobody searches the timestamp to see what time the entry was made. She had been wrong about that. Not always. But sometimes. Sometimes someone is in the bed, half awake, taking inventory of what's happening in the room while the world assumes they're asleep. Sometimes the person paying closest attention is the person you least expect to be counted. She thought about that on the drive home. The cracked tablet had been replaced by IT that afternoon. The files she'd scattered had been resorted. The bruise above her elbow, where Craig Whitmore's hand had been, was already fading to yellow at the edges. She thought about a note in a breast pocket, a paw print in blue ink. She thought about the particular quality of the hallway the moment Ryland Croft had walked out of room 412. Not the drama of it, not the way Craig had stepped back, not the way Zeus had sat like a stone. But the moment just before all of that, when she'd heard the sound of footsteps and something underneath them, and turned and understood that someone had come. Not because they had to. Because they'd decided to. She had spent 4 years learning to do her job in a building where most people were, in one way or another, not having a good day. She had learned to care without requiring that anyone notice. She had learned that the work was the point, and that the work had to be enough, and mostly it was. But there was something that had shifted, in the pocket of her scrubs, against her chest. Something folded twice in the handwriting of a man who counted things in the dark. 3 nights. He had counted. She hadn't known anyone was counting. She took the exit for her neighborhood, drove the familiar turns without thinking about them, and pulled into her parking space. Sat for a moment with the engine off. Then she gathered her bag, walked up the steps, unlocked her door, and went inside. Put the kettle on, stood at the counter with both hands wrapped around a mug, the same as always, except this time she wasn't running through yesterday. She was just standing there, quiet, present. Letting that be enough.